Good morning. Happy rainy Friday. Hope it's a good Friday for you. Welcome to this morning's ICAT Playdate. My name is Phyllis Newbill. I'm the Associate Director of Educational Networks at one of ICAT's centers, the Center for Educational Networks and Impacts. A few things before we get started this morning. Like every week, we are videoing in 360. There's a 360 camera here in the middle of the room, so just know that your image and your behavior is out on the internet this moment and will stay on the internet afterwards, so behave accordingly. To our friends who are watching online, good morning. I hope everything's going well for you wherever you are, and I'm glad you're joining us online. I hope you all will enjoy donuts and coffee, and when you're over there, and we can pass the clipboard around, but please do sign in, because that's how we justify donuts and coffee, which is super important. When you have questions this morning, wait for me to get to you with the mic. If you're online, I hope you'll use that questions link, and Ashley will help us. Where'd you go? There's Ashley. Ashley will help us get those transmitted out to the group. If you're here and Professional Development Network credit is helpful to you, just make sure you check in with me and make sure you get that credit applied. I can take care of that for you. In the way of announcements this morning, ICAT Day is coming on May 1st, so I hope you all will be over at the Moss Arts Center from 10 to 2 to see all of the exhibits that are going to be amazing there. We're sonifying everything, brainwaves, we're listening to the invasive species, we're listening to so many things. I've forgotten so many, but there's about 30 exhibits there to see, all kinds of new technologies, new ways of thinking about things, and you can see the work of ICAT, so I hope you'll be there. Winnie was here earlier, the dog, she belongs here, just so that's Winnie, and you're welcome to say hello. That's all of my announcements this morning. Next week's Playdate will be here in the same place. We'll be talking about broader impacts, and for faculty especially, for working with grants with Chelsea Haynes, who's part of the Center for Educational Networks and Impacts as well. And so now I'm going to turn it over to this crowd. They've been working on this hybrid collaboration acoustic pod, so we're looking at new furniture to make workplaces work better, because right now we're struggling with our hybrid work. So I'm going to pass it off to the team. Cora and Kelly are kicking us off, and Ranishka is here as well. Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier. So I'm glad you all are here, and I'm going to turn it over to you all to tell us all about it.
Like she said, my name is Kelly, and we're going to be presenting our project Kernel. Just to take you guys through a little agenda of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to introduce the team and then talk about why Workplace is transitioning to hybrid and what hybrid collaboration is, and then we'll walk through the project prompt that Steelcase gave us, and then talk about what we did in studio this past spring, and then talk about what we did with ICAT this summer.
Just a brief review of the rest of our team. Kelly Ranishka, and then our third teammate, Anna Johnson, and I all worked on our studio project that was a prompt based on Steelcase. And Anna, Kelly, and I were the original studio team, and Ranishka joined us over the summer. And then we worked with feedback from our professors, Steelcase representatives, and the ICAT team.
So I'm going to take a minute to talk about why the workplace is transitioning to hybrid. So if you guys don't know what hybrid work is, which I'm sure most of you do at this point, it balances working in an office environment with working at home. And this gives employees the flexibility to create their own schedules a lot of the time. And some of the benefits of this work model is employees can choose how and when they're most productive. It offers a better work-life balance and more efficient use of time by cutting out commuting and just giving you more time at home. And research has found that it creates less employee burnout. So hybrid collaboration, going off of that, is the collaboration between some employees being in the office and then some employees being at home or in a third location like a coffee shop. And the most common method of this is video calls, so you guys are familiar with it, but Zoom, Microsoft Teams, like we're on today, Google 360. So we're gonna go ahead and open up a question to you guys. What are some of the challenges you can think of that comes with hybrid collaboration?
For me, one of the hardest things about hybrid collaboration is that not everybody's in the same room together and you can't like work face to face with people as easy.
One of the biggest challenges we've experienced is the people who are joining remotely. If there are people around a conference room or people in the room, all the crosstalk, the audio, you don't get the experience of being in the room, and you can't distinguish different conversations if people are talking over each other. So you end up being an observer more than a participant.
So I was going to be flippant and say the hybrid part and the collaboration part are both challenges, but I think like really connecting with people is a lot about the kind of subtlety in the facial expressions and the little noises that we make of agreement when people say stuff, and that's hard to come through online.
Yeah, those are great examples. Thanks, guys. So we pulled this off of Steelcase's website, but some of the things that they found, like you said, there's an inequitable environment, so the people in person typically have a more collaborative experience than those zooming in. And then there's complex connections, so you need to consider audio, sightline, stuff like that, and then a failure to engage, and it can sometimes inhibit innovation. So moving on to the studio prompt, a furniture company, Steelcase, they collaborated with our studio last spring and asked us to reimagine semi-open spaces with integrated acoustic solutions. So essentially, we were tasked with creating a furniture system that was semi-enclosed that accommodated hybrid meeting modes. And so some of the considerations with that were creating a space to fit 4 to 6 people, accommodating a range of meeting modes, so whether that's lecture like this or more collaborative. And then we had to consider the pain points such as noise and presence disparity. It needed to be a semi-open environment, so we couldn't just stick it in an enclosed room. And then we also considered the seated posture for 30 minutes to 2-hour meetings. And then we researched some technology that would work really well for hybrid meetings. And then these are the dimensions we were tasked with sticking within. So moving on to our concept, based on all of those different requirements that they gave us, we came across the idea of a popcorn kernel. We were really inspired by the way that it transforms from one thing into another and just its flexibility, so we decided to roll with that. And so we wanted to create a balance of enclosure and openness and adaptability. And then like a popcorn kernel, we wanted a meeting space that was full of potential and allows for transformation into different meeting modes. And then even looking at the kernel itself, it has a hard exterior shell and then a soft inner core. And we realized that would be really good for acoustics with the soft inner core absorbing sound and then that hard outer core blocking sound. And then Cora is going to take you through some of the process.
Yeah, our studio projects are a big process of a series of iterations. So we're just going to walk y'all through those series of iterations within this project. So this was our first stage of process work, where we started with sketches, just exploring different curved forms, and then looking into the different structures of a back, how that could affect the comfortability and the noise levels within the seating. And then this was when we first started modeling we use a 3D modeling software called Revit, and then putting that into a rendering so you can see what it would look like in a space, and just with some very basic forms at this point with the curvatures, and then we had 2 different sizes of the pods here. This was in the mid-development stages of our project. We added some acoustic ribbing to increase the surface area that the sound waves would interact with to increase the sound absorption, and then integrated lumbar support into those ribs to increase the comfortability with seated posture for those longer meetings. And then we added lighting on the sides of the pods to provide lighting as you're having your video taken for those hybrid calls. And then there were screens and whiteboards also integrated into the structures. This was our final presentation for our studio project. We refined it a little bit more, switched the lighting to be overhead, And then the view on the right side shows the different components of the pod. So we have the seating, the ribbing, and then the core, which is the main structure. And we did add a handle on that so it could be easily moved around the space. And then the back, we have a couple of different variations for the back structure, and those were just wood slats. As you can see on the left here, there were a couple of options for both the interior and the exterior, with some credenzas and shelving on the interior as well. The pods were designed as singular components, and they can be rearranged depending on the needs of the meeting and how many screens you need or how many seats you need. And then the number of the pods can also vary depending on the spatial needs. Looking into materials, we kept with a harder shell on the outside and then that softer interior with the felt that absorbs the sound waves. And then we have the upholstery. So Renishka will be handing out some materials that y'all can feel how that would actually feel like. We did also consider technology, since that is a big part of the hybrid collaboration. We looked into video cameras that would hone in on different people as they're speaking, and then the audio would connect to the different people as they speak. And then the Logitech Scribe, which is at the bottom here, would pick up the drawings on a whiteboard as somebody's drawing or writing on a whiteboard, removing the obstruction of a hand and then displaying that on the on-screen display as well, so people who are remote can also see what's being drawn on the wall. And this is a final rendering of that project with the seating and then the screen pods with the credenzas and the shelving as well. After we finished our studio project, we collaborated with ICAT for about 3 months of further revisions with feedback from Steelcase as well. And we all had different roles in this process. Our teammate, Anna, continued research on the structure and buildability of the pods. And then this school year, she's been further developing physical models, which we have one of here. And then she worked on the small scale models as well. My role was to model the revisions in Revit as we got feedback from these physical models and then completing dimension drawings.
Yeah, and then once a week this summer, since Renishka and I were both here in Blacksburg, we would work on creating to scale prototypes, just testing out different forms and different sizes. And then I conducted some user testing at the end of the summer, and Renishka helped with creating the files for laser cutting and just the construction of those. So for our first prototype process, we decided to do very basic preliminary models. So with this, we just wanted to test out scale. Right at this point, we were between having them be 4 feet wide or 5 feet wide. And so as you can see in the top, Renishka and I are sitting in a 4 foot wide one on the top image and then a 5 foot wide one on the bottom image. And we realized that if we weren't comfortable with each other and we didn't know each other, the 4 foot one would be a little bit tight. So that was helpful just to get the dimensions down. And then for the next prototype, we decided to be a little bit more accurate to form. So this is where Renishka put together a file, and our team decided to create a waffle-like structure to create the core of the model. So with this, we cut out 14 layers of cardboard to be stacked up with these wooden dowels in between, and then we supported that with foam layers and then eventually covered it, which you'll see in the next image. And here was some of the prototype process. Renishka put these drawings together for our laser cutting. And then here is the completed model. The left and right image are what we finished by the end of the summer. We ended up wrapping it in a variety of materials that we could find. The front is like moving fabric, and then we had landscape fabric around the back just to make it a more solid form. And then early last semester, Anna decided to make it a little bit more accurate, so she added that ribbing on the inside. I think she used pool noodles for that, and she just finished up upholstering the seat. And so at the end of summer, we decided to conduct user testing. I invited my roommate and her cousin in just to give us some feedback. They're not designers, so it was just people who have experience with hybrid meetings. But some of the positive feedback we got from them was there was a comfortable amount of space on that 5 foot bench. So we were really glad we went ahead and switched to that. They said the pod in general was a comfortable height. They felt like the height provided a good amount of privacy and enclosure. The seat height was good too. We were playing around with that. And then there was a comfortable distance between the bench and a screen. We did a test where you'll see it on the next page. We put the screen in front of them and they were testing that out. And they also liked that the seat could be easily moved because in our studio model, the seat was still connected to the model. And then some of the revision considerations they gave us was they would prefer greater enclosure on the sides. So with this model, it almost seemed like just a seat back, but they wanted it to come in on the sides for a little bit more enclosure and privacy. And the table we had them test on, they said it was a little low, so when designers spec this model, they would need to use a higher table. They told us to consider adding armrests and a cup holder and a place for bags. So just to make those longer meetings more comfortable, potentially an attached desk if the sliding tables were gonna get in the way. And then they suggested we add a mobile charger over an integrated one because these are flexible pods. It doesn't make sense to always connect them to the floor. So Steelcase has products where you can wheel in mobile chargers. So they suggested that. And then we also asked them if they would prefer just zooming over one screen in front of them or if they would also like their laptops in front of them. And they said they would prefer their laptops to be with them as well. So just considering the users of this pod always having laptops in front of them. And then with the actual model, we had it slanting in the back, but they found that they like to sit up really straight. And so they were like, why don't you go ahead and make it straight in the front and then maybe slanted in the back for that structural support. And lastly, we didn't even include those handles on our model, but they just said to make sure those are really obvious so that people know that it can be moved around. And then lastly, Anna, this past semester, she's been creating these 1 foot to 1 inch scale models. She's going to create 6 of them just so we can see how they look arranged in a full pod. And I guess the video is not playing, but she laser cut those as well. And that's the structure she had. And yeah, here's the one she's completed so far. And now Cora's going to talk about our final design iteration.
While Kelly, Renishka, and Anna were doing these physical models and coming up with suggestions for changes, I was modeling them in Revit to see how all of the pieces would fit together. And these were just a couple of the changes that we made, and then you can again see those 4 main components. Looking at the seating itself, we did change it to be a mobile seat so it can be removed from the back, and we did make it wider so it can fit 2 people comfortably. And there are 4 handles, 1 on each corner with a glide base so it can easily be moved around. And then we did add those armrests and cup holders as well, and then integrated storage cubbies underneath it. And these are just those dimension drawings for that with the final measurements. And then for the final design for the back, we made the back more slanted and then the interior of the back be straight to provide better back support. We removed the lumbar support from the ribbing since it is now on the seat itself. And then we also shortened the overall height of the piece to fit through a standard doorway if it needed to move rooms. And those are the final dimensions for the back. And then these are the final views of it all together. If you wanted a 6-pod piece, how those would work together, and then a view of the final pod. We did keep the overhead lighting as well. And then different options for the back and the interiors. We kept the credenza and the shelving. And the pods could also be flipped around if you wanted more of a workspace or a gallery for more presentations. And then the seating could be placed inside. And then this is the interior view. If you were having a meeting, so you could have one screen with the slides on the screen and then another screen with the hybrid users on it. So you can also see their facial expressions during the meeting, and then the people can also be seeing both of those screens. And we'll open it up to any questions that you'll have.
Thank you so much for sharing this work. It's amazing. Coming your way with questions.
Thank you. That was a terrific presentation. And I had kind of a meta question. Virginia Tech is really emphasizing experiential learning, and I was curious, how did you interact with the client, with Steelcase? What was your interactions with them? And frankly, how did you feel the interactions went for you?
I can take that one. So throughout the summer, especially, we would Zoom Steelcase probably every 2-3 weeks, something like that. And we would just do a very casual, here's what we've discovered, here's what we've done. And it was really great getting feedback from them because they brought in engineers, different designers, specifically furniture designers, I think someone who even markets their products. So it was really interesting to see all the different components that go into furniture design and just everything that you need to consider that we wouldn't usually consider creating something on a 3D modeling software. They were like, oh, like you really want to make sure that like the seat back is at the perfect angle, you know? And yeah, it was good getting to collaborate with such a large variety of disciplines. But we did even find that something like this would have been really helpful for those meetings because at times there were like multiple of us together and the audio wasn't great. It was kind of hard to collaborate. So it was funny. We kind of wanted our own product for those.
Great. Oh, I'll be back. And I know we have one online too. So I'll come to this other session.
Yeah, so what did you learn in your test? Did you get a chance to assess how the acoustics were affected by the pod shape and the padding and that sort of thing?
So I think that was a little difficult with our own test because we only created one model. But Tanner was actually more so testing acoustics in, what did you call it? The hex pod. So it was actually a pretty similar form to ours, but there was a lot more technology with that. So we did do some user testing where I think we zoomed out our professor and some other people who helped with the project, and we were just testing out the different technology with that. I think ultimately, like, this is good for acoustics, but the technology piece also really needs to be there and working in conjunction, so.
That was your question too. Okay, good. I think we have one online.
So the kernel sounds pretty interesting. Has it offered any benefits like an increase in productivity or things like that? Have you been able to test any of that?
Could you repeat the question? I didn't hear the last part.
Okay. So does the kernel offer any benefits like an increase in productivity? I think the question is if you've been able to test for increases in productivity or things like that.
We haven't been able to test that since, like Kelly said, we only did have one model, but seeing how the users did interact with that model, they were able to sit together and would have been able to work more closely together rather than being across the table from each other and still seeing the presentation. So I think it would increase productivity in a hybrid meeting in this type of setting like we have on the screen, where some of the people are online and then some in person, since it increases that collaboration and visibility between those crowds.
Can you talk about how this fits into your educational plans?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, it was definitely very different than most of our studio projects. We're interior design majors, if we didn't mention that. So typically we're working on full spaces and creating more enclosed spaces. So actually making our own furniture versus just arranging existing furniture was an interesting challenge, but it's made us consider more about the furniture pieces that we are putting into our projects that we've created since now. So I think looking at the existing furniture, I'm a much more appreciative of all the work that's gone into it, and I think I know more of what to look for when specifying furniture for projects because of this.
Yeah, I would agree. It was very interesting to get to see a bit more of the furniture manufacturing side of design, and then also learning a bit more about the engineering side as well with the Steelcase collaboration.
Another question from online. How much would this design cost, and how would costs be controlled to clients like public schools?
I didn't look into costs or budgets at all. I don't know if you had.
No, we have not looked into costs. Just commercial grade furniture like this is going to be a little bit more expensive than what you would find as just a normal consumer. So I definitely think it's something that like universities would easily be able to add to their spaces, and certainly workplaces. However, I don't know if it's something that smaller like public schools are going to be able to immediately add, but I definitely think they could take some of the research and kind of piece it together to create their own meeting spaces.
So I was just wondering, were you guys given like complete free reign, from the get-go, or did they give you an early idea of what they were looking for and you kind of went from there?
We had an original prompt for our studio project, and then we did have a list of considerations with that had certain dimensions we had to stay within, and then certain elements that we had to accommodate, such as view angles, and then the seating number. It had to be 4 to 6 people. For our studio project, we did stay within that original footprint, but then with the revisions, the 6-person pod, or the 6 pods together, would be outside of that footprint, so we did stray a little bit outside of that at the end. But
yeah, but we were in a group of 3 in our studio, but there were a lot of other groups working on the same project prompt, and they all looked incredibly different. I think we were the only ones who did these like individual pods that could be arranged into one, but other people, they did just, full on semi-enclosed spaces that had, existing furniture pieces in it. So they all looked incredibly different. So it was a lot of free reign with that.
Another one. Oh, sorry. I've got one more, and that is I'm 5'2", and my son is 6'1", and we're finding that our furniture no longer works for both of us anymore. How did you work with different body sizes and shapes as you made these plans?
we did have the interior height tall enough to accommodate, I think, was it 6'6" or 6'7" probably, for when you're sitting down.
It ended up being 6'6".
Yeah. So for seating posture, the height wouldn't be an issue since it would be tall enough.
Yeah, and then with the seat too, we were looking at different seating postures. I mean, Renishka and I both tried it out. Obviously, neither of us are super tall, but we realized that people like to kind of have their feet come in a little bit. That's why you can see that slant on the side elevation of that. But I think we just took kind of an estimate of what different height seats were. We were looking at like lounge seats and those heights, and then like chairs, which are a little bit taller. And we were like, what would people prefer for these longer meetings? Like, do they want to feel like they're sitting in a chair? Or do they want to feel like they're sitting in a couch? So ultimately, I think we went with the lower seating level just because these are typically longer meetings, and a lot of them you're listening for a long time. And the tables that we are suggesting go with these models, they are more adapted to fit the height of a lounge piece of furniture. So that's kind of what we went with. Obviously, nothing's ever gonna be a one-size-fits-all, so we tried our best to accommodate everyone.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I think we're at time, or very close to it, so I want to thank you all so much for sharing your work with us today, and we will look forward to next, let's give them a giant round of applause. Good work, y'all. We'll see you back here next week for more donuts and coffee and broader impacts with Sunny. Have a great weekend.